I am Jerry Kersey. Welcome to Bygone St Albans. This film is a nostalgic trip through time. It shows St Albans' life over 70 years. The journey will take us past archaeological digs and girl guides, religious life and theatrical troupes. Local people captured their lives, which gives us a wonderful retrospective. The 1948 pageant was a huge public spectacle. It involved thousands. In the 30s, community outings were common. Getting a new tyre had a different meaning in past years. This is a nostalgic journey through the years, not an exact history. Films gathering dust are here given new life. So if you would like, please relax in your chair and watch the scenes of yesteryear unfolding in front of you. St Albans has a rich and wonderful history which reaches back and back into antiquity. All around there are signs and symbols. The cathedral itself contains a story since it's built of Roman bricks. These were collected from the ruins of Verulamium, the Roman town. Similarly constructed churches and cathedrals are also found in the south of France. St Albans' history speaks of many things. The Magna Carta, or Great Charter, which is the original Bill of Rights, was conceived in the abbey before King John signed it at Runnymede. Nobles and bishops met to confer over this at the abbey, and so it proved to be the cradle of all parliaments in the UK. In the early years of the millennium, the abbey was the foremost religious institution in the country, above Westminster Abbey. Its abbot would lead any national gathering of bishops. A tradition of independence characterized St Albans' affairs at the time, the abbey being answerable to no one except the Pope. But St Albans hid yet deeper secrets, and the interwar years provided an opportunity to rediscover them. In the Great Depression of the 30s, St Albans City received a government-backed loan. This was to provide work for the unemployed and finance the creation of Verulamium Park. This in turn triggered the major excavations of Verulamium, the former Roman city. Here we see some footage of the campaign headed by Dr. Wheeler, director of the London Museum, and his wife Tessa, which lasted 5 years. During this time, some astonishing discoveries were made. Many of the finds were spectacular, especially the mosaic pavements. The Verulamium Museum was built in 1938 to display them. Historians believe that Verulamium was the capital of all southern England, since it was thought that it became a municipum before the reign of Nero was over. Proof confirming this was not found this time. Evidence of another momentous event was uncovered though. Ashes from the visit of Boudica, or Boadicea, Queen of the Iceni. After the death of her husband, her lands in East Anglia were usurped by Roman officials. She was scourged and her daughters raped. In fury, she gathered the Iceni and other tribes into an army of 100,000 souls and travelled through and razed to the ground the Roman towns of Colchester, London, and in AD 61, Verulamium. Finally, she was defeated by a general. That final battle is thought to have taken place near to St Albans, but the location has never been found. Over the years, exploratory digs have revealed yet further possibilities. Julius Caesar led the first Roman invasion of Britain in 54 BC. It was thought his invasion came to a crunch at a mighty battle against the Britons at Wheat Hampstead. Later, this fortress moved to St Albans. Cunobeline was one of the tribal leaders of the time. Shakespeare's play Cymbeline is about him. When the Second Roman invasion took place in 43 AD, Caractacus was king. A major tribal capital was established near Prewood, near Gorhambury. Evidence of minting facilities were found here. Coins were found bearing the letters VER, the river name. St Albans was a location of countrywide importance. Regarding hidden secrets, there is even a legend of a golden calf which lies buried somewhere in one of the hollows along the road to Gorhambury. It was stowed by priests in times of trouble. The settlement was ransacked, the inhabitants fled, and the calf never retrieved. Such events as the 30s digs helped expand our knowledge and understanding of St Albans' ancient past. The St Albans of the 30s is not that far away, but as time goes on, it slips further. These passing images can help us now appreciate the town when it was itself on a journey of rediscovery about its own past. Each passing day lays more secrets in the storehouse of time. This is perhaps one of the most interesting pieces of archive in the whole collection. What will be shown is two fetes organised to raise money for the then voluntary city hospital in 1943 and 44. It provides a glimpse of a society pulling together in common cause. The interests of not just individuals, but also the whole community are at the centre of all the activity. "1944 was the centenary of the hospital. 100 years previously, 5 clergymen and a doctor started a small dispensary on Holywell Hill. This was to become the St Albans and Mid Herts Hospital. The war was in full flood during these years, and the effective organisation of the hospital system was a matter of national importance. Even so, many of the funds were still raised by voluntary means. These fetes were held on a few days over the August bank holiday weekend. They were attended by many thousands of people who put their skills to the test, making the very most out of their pennies and tanners. The fetes were billed as one of the series of wartime holidays at home. Due to rationing, people were unable to get away and had to make their own entertainment where they lived. With attractions such as swings and boating on a lake, The occasion was spoken of as being like a seaside holiday at home. What makes it particularly topical these days is that, growing from a history of the workhouse and the poor law which was still in place, within 2 years there would be an Act of Parliament which would create the welfare state. Medical services would come under the wing of central government, and free hospital treatment would be made available to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. Against the background of the war effort, the Beveridge Report of 1942 recommended this. The war government of 1944 accepted these recommendations and published a white paper. This left it to the newly elected Labour government in 1945 to implement these ideas and to create the National Health Service under the guiding hand of Aneurin Bevan. The star of the hospital matron was rising. In the event, the amounts of money raised were record-breaking. In 1943, the amount was over £3,000, and 44, this was exceeded with over £4,000. There were many, many different sideshows spread throughout the park, helping the visitors unburden themselves of change. Penny on the Square, Haunted House, and the Egyptian Tent were other games. One particular sight caught the public's attention on the Monday of 1943. Pipers of a battalion of the Irish Guards played a selection of well-known airs such as Gary Owen and the Mountains of Mourne. Another bright spectacle to be witnessed was the presentation by the fire services. In the 1943 fete, there was a special exhibition of firefighting skills. A particular feature was made of the latest techniques of rescuing someone from a burning building. In 1944, the emphasis was on a display of firefighting appliances which showed the development of firefighting through time. Following the manually operated appliance of 1770 came the horse-drawn manual of 1815, followed by the steamer of 1890, with the fire crews in period garb. Displays were given with all 4 machines. Some of the most lively times were perhaps to be had at the open-air theatre, which proved quite an attraction. The programmes on show were described at the time as highly entertaining. There was an almost ceaseless round of music, song and dancing. Presentations were made by the Pygram's School of Dancing, Miss Jolly's School of Dancing and Doreen's Victory Tappers. Also featured were the Mallory Players and the Cheerios Concert Party, while the talent shows for both children and adults unearthed some unknown artists of much skill. The large audiences were also happy to see a nice feature, the Bathing Beauties. The crowd was adjudged to have been tremendous, and some couldn't get in. Political correctness was not yet born, so there was not a parade of men. The Abbey was not the only religion to have influence in St Albans. One shoot of the Reformation created a small group of worshippers called Christadelphians. The tradition came from America in the middle of the 18th century, from an English person there called John Thomas. In this anthology is a unique series of clips which record the social gatherings of this group between 1930 and 1940. This record unexpectedly gives us a chance to see what life was like in the 30s. The Christadelphians established large communities in both Birmingham and London, while in between were smaller groupings, St Albans being one of these. These gatherings were called ecclesias, or sometimes fraternals. The meaning of the name Christadelphian has a similar derivation. As in the name of Philadelphia, the Greek word for brother is joined with another to create an entirely new word. So, Christadelphian means brother or relation of Christ. Christadelphians wanted to create a distinction between themselves and mainstream Christianity, which they considered to have lost its way. So they made a fresh start and a new name. They turned back directly to the Bible for their source of guidance in life. In its own way, this follows the reforming tradition, which started from the Middle Ages onwards. Keeping themselves a bit away from the organized life of general society, they lived a close social life within their own boundaries. The gatherings helped support a sense of community. These could vary from the more usual visits to a place of worship like a church to the more elaborate occasions when they would all meet together for a day or a weekend, or perhaps just meeting and sharing a meal. So they experienced more fully their life. Fellowship, of course, was the main reward of the gatherings, but this was enhanced by special practices. Skipping, an egg and spoon race, sack race, and so on. Outside of St Albans, they paid a visit to Hatfield House. While within the city, one fraternal was held at Tingey's Farm in Old St Albans near the Fighting Cocks pub, a site which nowadays includes a running track, and another at Ashwell House in Verulam Road. Christadelphians were conscientious objectors during the war, even having speeches made in Parliament recognising their position. One interesting link in this respect, though, is that they were instrumental in supporting people fleeing Europe. Here is a Jewish day before the war, with traditional dancing. The Christadelphian religion laid emphasis on returning to the source for inspiration. Two Scottish exports are famous worldwide: whiskey and people. In places, the people have made a big impression. Not far away in Corby, Northamptonshire, there is a special Scottish BBC transmitter. It was in 1965 that the MacGregor was in Rothamsted Park, Harpenden. As the Chieftain of the Year, Major Sir MacGregor of MacGregor, Chief of Clan Gregor, opened the 1965 Hertfordshire Highland Games. "The only thing lacking," said the MacGregor, "is the sight of the Scottish hills in the background." This area has strong Scottish links. There is a flourishing Caledonian society. The Highland Games were a feature of local history until as recently as 1990. But perhaps the high summer of the Games was from 1950 until 1972, when the Games were held at Rothamsted Park in Harpenden, attracting crowds of between 8,000 and 10,000. Harpenden was invaded for the day by a cheerful gathering of people coming from all around the world. The roots of the original Highland Games are in the countryside. Folk would gather once a year in a celebration of skills and talents. Some tossed the caber, threw the sheaf, or tossed the hammer. Other displays were of dancing and music. Away from the main arena on spare platforms, you would catch dancers limbering up, waiting their turn to perform a fling, sword dance, or perhaps strathspey and reel of tulloch before the judges. Part of the aims of the Games were, in the words of the 1950 programme, to raise funds for the Royal Scottish Corporation, the Royal Caledonian Schools, and other charities nominated by the committee. So apart from good fun, help was extended beyond the limits of the arena. Behind the scenes was hidden an exhibition of Scottish antiquities. Celtic silver brooches, a fine ram's head snuff box, and a cigarette box made from the timber of a Spanish galleon wrecked in Tobermory Bay were on display in 1965. As well as this, there were sheepdog trials and ancient and modern products including an Orkney fireside chair and even curling stones. Among athletic events were woven one or two lighter moments such as pillow fights, the greasy pole, and the sack race. Pole vaulting was even introduced later on. Seen here are the St Albans Pipe Band with bearskins walking away from us, and we will see the Stevenage Pipe Band coming towards us. The highlight of the day, though, was the massed bands of pipes and drums marching and counter-marching. The day started at about 10:30 with solo piping and dancing. So in this way, the final gathering had added effect. The crowning display of the 100 Pipers. The day was finally wrapped up with an evening of Scottish country dancing in the public hall with music from McBain's band until midnight. And the last of the exhausted revellers would call enough, leaving Harpenden. Visitors from abroad would go home taking memories and telling tales of their visit to the Braemar of the South. Harpenden was left alone, allowed to be itself again, until 12 months had passed by the clock once more. As far as it is remembered, these pictures are from the last time it was possible to skate on Verulamium Lake in the spring of 1956. Since then, the ice has always been broken one way or another before the waters have had chance to freeze over. Sometime memory romances the past. The Met Office records are interesting. Over a period of 50 years in Hertfordshire, the temperature of any of the winter months has never fallen below freezing point when averaged out for a whole month. The variations in temperature during these months go between a low of -5 degrees Celsius and a surprising high of 15 degrees Celsius. So if one wants to enjoy the snow during the cold snaps, it's better to do so as soon as one can. This was the case this time. It was the weekend of the 4th of February, the middle of winter. The newspaper records crowds coming out in force to make the most of it. first to enjoy the ice were a group of children on Thursday evening. By Saturday, the ice was thick enough to bear a far greater crowd, and in the afternoon, a record number of 600 skaters were estimated to be on the lake. A thaw set in on Sunday, though. By the end of the day, the ice was not safe anymore. Happily, the rangers said no accidents were reported. "1948 was a year of celebration. The war years were over and privations were easing. A new world was there to look forward to. St Albans City wanted to capture this uplifting spirit for the good of all, and it did just that. By holding a gigantic pageant involving at least 1,000 performers over a period of 4 days at St Albans Tide in the summer of '48. Altogether, about 4,000 people were involved in the production, and at least another 4,000 people saw the performance. It attracted nationwide and even international attention. It was so described that there was an overwhelming sense of community in the town, with the tentacles of this joint effort reaching out to leave almost no local family untouched in some way. The pageant master was Cyril Swinson, one of the founder members of the Company of 10, St Albans' highly regarded theatre group, which itself made great contributions to the pageant. In his book about the company, 10 of the Best, Terence Newell describes the atmosphere at the time as being something quite special. After several weeks of rehearsal in church halls and soggy fields, the big day finally arrived. The town is alive with people going to and fro, especially on the roads leading to the arena. Medieval ladies on bicycles jostle with 17th century royalists stuck in traffic jams. Scurrying monks bypass fully armored Roman soldiers, and demure Regency ladies ride pillion, eating sandwiches on their way to the theatre. Everyone is converging on the site of the Roman city of Verulamium. Gracing this scene is a special guest. As an acknowledgement of the enormous efforts of the whole community, she also comes down the streets to Verulamium to see the excitement and spectacle of the day. It is Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, who we know now as the Queen Mother. The pageant reviews 2,000 years of history. Opening the scene, we see a decree from Emperor Diocletian from Rome. Following the dispersal of the disciples from Israel and St. Peter's visit to Rome, Christianity has spread through the veins of Roman civilization and threatens to overthrow the old gods. Diocletian said, "All Christian churches to be burnt. All Christians deprived of liberty if they do not renounce the Christian God and turn again to the true and ancient gods of Rome."